Hello everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Monster Report. Nick Adam Poling here. Monster Report's a show highlighting those entertaining creatures of film history. And today I have a special interview with Mr. Scott Toy Guru Neitlich. Scott, how you doing?
I'm awesome. Good morning.
All right, it's excellent to have you. I discovered Scott through YouTube. I've started getting into a lot of MOTU collecting. I've always been an adult collector, with Godzilla mostly, but kind of recently reinvigorated my Masters of the Universe, especially with the Origins line and the Revelation coming out, and always been a fan, but kind of put it off to the side for the kaiju side of things, but now is an exciting time to be a Masters of the Universe fan, and Scott's channel, Spector Creative on YouTube, excellent channel, lots of industry, just information and experience that he brings. He has been the brand manager for Mattel with the Classics line, correct, of the Masters of the Universe?
Oh yes, that was 10 years of my life.
Yes, so and so many other insights from the toy industry. So that's why I wanted to bring you on here and get our viewers to know you a little bit better. Check out your channel and maybe get a little bit of insight, because what's interesting is adult collectors have a lot of complaints. You get them all the time. I get them too. We're seeing supply chains. We're seeing shortages affected, and sometimes it's not so much a simple explanation. And checking out Scott's channel is part of that. But we'll get to that a little later. Tell me a little about your childhood and how you kind of got into the industry, which is the toy industry, and how that evolved and developed.
Sure, absolutely. And thank you for the very flattering introduction. I appreciate it. So let's see. Well, I was born in Connecticut and then grew up in California, where I did high school and college. And actually, one of my very close high school friends, Evan Baker, who could possibly be one of your viewers, is like the biggest Godzilla fan that I know. He used to write into G-Fan magazine like every month and get published. So if that's still meaningful to you.
Yes, it is.
So yeah, his kaiju toy collection is redonkulous. So that was kind of my introduction to Godzilla, was him, constantly pushing that stuff on me in a good way. So after college, I went to college in Santa Barbara, California, and majored in film and communication, and I wanted to be a screenwriter, more so to write TV commercials, like advertising. And while I worked on getting into that, I got a job at an ad agency doing medical pharmaceutical writing, where I actually worked on glaucoma. I know you're in eye care as well, so yeah, we could definitely talk about the optic nerve and hypertension and all of that fun stuff. And after 4 years of that, I managed to get my foot in the door with Mattel, because my experience writing copy for medical was very transferable to the toy industry, in the sense that all of the legal jargon and the warnings and the, take this medicine and your head might explode, all of that stuff transfers very much to toys, in the sense that you've got the safety warnings and the small parts warning and the legal. So I was always trying to get into the toy industry. That was sort of like a pipe dream, especially growing up in California and seeing Mattel on the side of the freeway. Every time we drive up and down from Orange County to LA, you'd see the giant Mattel building in Hawthorne with this huge Mattel logo facing the freeway. So it's like I knew Mattel was right there. So, long story short, so I got my foot in the door of Mattel as a copywriter in Hot Wheels, doing I was naming the basic cars and writing the copy on the play sets. And I made as an adult collector myself, I made I asked the question of upper management when they did sort of like a, down from the ivory tower in the trenches meeting about, ideas from everyone. I said, why aren't we selling action figures to the adult collector? I'm spending, X amount of money a month, and none of it's going to my own company. So 4 months later, I finally got a meeting with the VP, and I brought in a box of stuff and dumped it out on his desk and explained what it was, what the adult collector market was like, because Mattel is really, especially, this was 2005, while they were aware there was an adult collector market. It was, the large companies are very focused on the big, Hot Wheels and Barbie and Fisher Price and that kind of thing. So I made a pitch, and they were willing to sort of give it a try. They had some success recently with the 2000X He-Man line, doing some convention exclusives that were aimed at the adult collector. The Mike Young, the 2000X He-Man series, which was the last time we had He-Man before the current renaissance we're going through, was, while it wasn't picked up by kids as much, it was by adults. But adult collectors aren't enough to support a line at retail. That's sort of like kind of the proof in the pudding about that. The toy line was aimed at kids. Adults were just gravy. They did do, but the few SKUs they did do for adults at conventions, not at retail, did very well. So they knew they had an adult collector audience, but weren't quite sure how to get to them. So we started up MattyCollector.com, which was Mattel's Figure of the Month club, more or less. And we did, Batman and He-Man, Ghostbusters. We did prop replicas, Back to the Future, Voltron, all sorts of stuff. But then at the same time, my actual job was running the DC lines at retail. Because it was one of those serendipitous things where right when I joined the marketing group, because of the Matty Collector pitch, Mattel had just secured the master license for DC Comics. Previously, they could only do Superman and Batman. So now they could do everybody. Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Solomon Grundy, etc. And since I was such a huge comic book fan and had a knowledge base about this, and I was the only one, they said, you could help run this line at retail, and then you could also do Matty Collector on the side, which I kind of didn't realize at the time was like doing, 3 or 4 jobs. Like most people would just do DC at retail.
Right.
But I was loving it so much. It was really a labor of love. And then after about 10 years, my former supervisor, who had left Mattel and was now at Jakks Pacific, recruited me over to Jakks as a director to oversee their Big Figs line. You might know them from their Godzilla figure they did, which was amazing. It was like one of their best-selling figures of all time.
Yes.
And and that was a chance for me to work on Star Wars, which was a huge love of mine. I worked on Star Wars Hot Wheels, but never Star Wars figures. Uh-huh. Then I spent some time at Jada. I did their minis line of the Nano. That was me. And then a little time at Loot Crate at Entertainment Earth, fixing up some stuff for them. And then it was time to really think about the family and head to North Carolina and picked up everything and moved out here and started Spector Creative. And that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, and with your experience through the brand managing, you're doing this as as I guess you could call it freelance or your own business now, so with your own customer base?
Yeah, I mean, more or less what Spector Creative is, and you can check us out, of course, on SpectorCreative.com, or as well the YouTube channel you mentioned, which is full of videos about how the toy industry actually works. There's so many videos on YouTube about either reviewing toys or, the history of, a toy line, anything. My channel is much more about, let me explain why distribution is like this, or let me explain why exclusives are done this way, because a lot, as you said in the beginning, a lot of toy fans we're very emotional. We're very attached to our collections. And so, we tend to, I think, sort of jump to conclusions or make erroneous, statements. And I'm just trying to fill in the blanks, basically. And so besides running a YouTube channel, which is really just for funsies, what Spector Creative is I do branding, content, and retail solutions. So for people who have ideas for toys, or they have a toy but they want to get it to the next step, they want to get it to retail, or they want to get they have a form factor they want to get a license for, I help clients get to that next step. And I'm also we're developing our own product line that'll be at Target in the fall. So lots of exciting stuff.
All right, looking forward to seeing that. And so, what's cool about listening to from the inside, kind of the corporate structure of why we might have complaints as adult collectors, because it's like, boy, those greedy corporatists who just don't crank out enough product for us, or didn't listen to what we had to say. It's like there's so much that goes into that. With why it is, why a figure might end up the way it did, or why it's so rare, or why it's a peg warmer, why it's been on the shelf for so long. And I think that's so interesting to tell people about. It's like, just check out Scott's channel, because he explains it all, and then you're like, wow, what do I have to really complain about except for the fact that, boy, that's just the way the world works. If I had a product line that I wanted to put out there and I started wanting to produce it, I'm going to have to shell out a lot of cash. I'm going to have to make sure that my distributors are correct with things. I'm going to have to make sure that in the end I make a profit off of it. If I have empty product on the shelf, it's burning a hole in my pocket. So that really illuminates a lot to why the adult collecting industry is, may have some unfounded complaints, but at the same time, that is good data, I feel, for the, toy makers out there to see, where they're coming from and what they're desiring and all that. But even like you said, the adult collector is just the icing on the cake. In a sense, it's just a bonus, because most of the toy industry is focused on kids, isn't it?
Big picture, yes, and it's also, I don't want to also classify that complaints that we, and I'm including myself as an adult collector, have. I'm not, I'm definitely not saying they're not valid, but it's much more like, your complaint is valid, but let me explain why that complaint exists. It's not like, and as you said, a lot of us, we think it's like, oh, it's like greedy executives like, Montgomery Burns sitting there like, oh, how can I, screw over the adult collector by having this one per case, or, or not ship enough. And it really isn't that case. And, there are companies like, your Super 7s and your NECAs that are small enough that can cater just to the adult collector. It is a very valid population and, consumer base, but it's also much smaller than we think. I mean, I've seen people, videos on YouTube, people saying, there's 100,000 people that want this figure. I'm like, oh God, no, not even in the ballpark. Like, I mean, one thing I can't talk about a lot of times is production quotas, because that's proprietary information to toy companies. But it's so much, like I know what I know both what we've made and what we've sold, and it's so tiny. Like, we're so much smaller than, because we're so passionate about whether it's superheroes or kaiju or Star Wars figure, whatever it is, whatever our brand is, that's our cup of tea. Universally, we're all adult collectors, and we're also very, it's like people who collect kaiju might not also be collecting Marvel Legends, or people who collect Marvel Legends might not also be collecting Star Wars Black Series.
Right.
On my office for examples. Yeah. So, we're, because of that, because of the segmentation, it's not like there's this huge group of adult collectors out there, because there's like, we're in these little bunkers and these silos of our brands that we like. So you can't just put out a figure and say, oh, this will sell to every adult collector out there. Like, no, some adult collectors don't buy that brand or that form factor or that type of character. So I think that perpetuates the feeling that and the internet, that we're more numerous than we are.
Right. And then when it comes to like the adult collector industry, the kind of, like you said, there's crossover between certain IP that's out there that, you might have a Godzilla collector like myself that's also collecting MOTU, but I might not be into Star Wars collecting, because a lot of adult collectors kind of find themselves saying, I've got to kind of pick the IP. I love Star Wars too, but maybe I'm not going to get into that collecting. So obviously that's a market that maybe NECA missed on me, but they've got the market on other adult collectors. And like you mentioned, those companies that are out there like NECA, and in the Godzilla world, we have, NECA, who's just recently lost the license, for instance, for Godzilla. But then we also have our X Plus and Bandai and all of these others. Talk a little about Jakks, and I want to cater a little to my Godzilla audience as well. On the Jakks line, I think it was the big the 2014 Godzilla that was put out that was just running off the shelves. I got myself one when it was new as well. I think it was from FYE, so at retail. Tell me a little about your time at Jackson with the Godzilla line, if you would.
Sure. And I wish I had more to tell because of there wasn't that many SKUs, but. I was brought over to Jakks. So this was 2015 I started, or 15? No, it had to be 15. Boy, it blurs. I'll have to look at my resume to see what date I started. But I mean, the Godzilla figure was definitely pre-existing before I got there. So one thing that I did was, as marketing director, was bringing all of the big figs that we did under one brand and calling them big figs and getting that on package. Which was no easy task because we had 10 different licenses: Power Rangers, Star Wars, DC, Godzilla. So we're working with Toho and Warner Brothers and so many different studios. And the Godzilla figure, I do know. I mean, that was absolutely their best-selling big fig by far. Better than Darth Vader or Stormtroopers. And it was 95% to kids. Because while adult collectors, of course, are going it's like shooting fish in a barrel in a way. But for kids, I think it was $30. It might have been $40. I don't remember the SRP, but it was very affordable, and it was a very large toy. So that made it, it was a great gift for kids because you got a lot of toy for your money with that. I do remember there were some issues where they built in the capability to have electronics, but it didn't have electronics. So there was a battery compartment that opened to nothing. Right. So there were issues with that where people expected electronics even though it didn't say it on package. And one of the things that I was really pushing for was, since Legendary and Warner were working on kind of the Kaiju shared universe, the Kong, Godzilla, movies that are coming out now. I wanted to use big figs not just to do large stormtroopers, but to continue doing all of these, giant monsters, all the kaiju out there, because it felt like as Jakks we could sort of own that, doing these because it's a brand that is works at such a large scale. A giant Darth Vader is just a standalone kind of neat piece to have against your wall. But a giant Godzilla or a giant King Kong, or giant Mothra, or whatever, it's meant to be big, and it could work with your 6-inch or 3 3/4 figures, no matter what they are. So I was really pushing for that, especially with the movie slate that was coming out, and we had a relationship with Legendary because we were doing the World of Warcraft movie. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think upper management just kind of got scared away because it's a lot of tooling when you're doing such a big thing like that. It's really expensive to tool. That's the giant metal molds that are used in the factory. Think of it like a Play-Doh mold, but made of metal, and you inject the hot plastic into it, and out comes the figure. So, for a 6-inch figure, a tool is going to cost between $50,000 and $100,000. So imagine for a 30 or 40-inch Godzilla figure how much that's going to cost. We're talking a major capital investment. So that's really where some of the concern is, with doing such large characters. But it was absolutely part of my plan. I'm going to be upfront that I'm not the world's biggest Godzilla fan, but especially, growing up in high school and being friends with someone who was such a huge fan gave me, I actually called him when I was at Jakks, and I was like, okay, I need you to give me a 101 on the whole kaiju universe, so I can sound like I'm an expert. And I would also go to him for ideas, like, okay, who would be the best ones to make? What variants could we do that are acceptable? Like, doing Godzilla with the like the nuclear burn effect or things like that, because I wanted to make sure that we had to maximize the tool. So if we could put out as many different versions as possible, but you're not just going to put out like green Godzilla and pink Godzilla, and polka dot Godzilla. So I wanted to make sure that any paint deco variant we did is accurate to the fan base. So he would like give me lists like, oh, and like with images and say, okay, like these are the different versions that are acceptable. These are the ones that fans really want. Like if you really wanted to stretch it, like in this one movie in 1964, he like had blue on him or something, that kind of thing. So
yeah,
so I was really pushing to do more especially because the original figure did so well. But unfortunately, just the whole thing kind of collapsed on itself, especially when Star Wars sort of collapsed, because that was kind of the backbone of the line, and the movies, from a toy perspective, did not do well at all for any company. Episode 7 sold well until the movie came out, Rogue One, and then it was kind of just all downhill from there, with each successive Star Wars film selling fewer and fewer toys.
yes.
And retail tends to be like elephants that they never forget. So that's also why, for those of you who are Star Wars fans watching this and wonder why there's not more Mandalorian stuff out there, it's because they've had 5 movies that have done poorly. And even though Mandalorian and Baby Yoda are awesome and very popular, they're coming on the back of 5 perceived, I don't want to say failures, but didn't meet expectations.
Right.
A while. So, it's going to be hard to get retail excited, like, oh, no. We know we just had 5 movies that didn't do well, but this Mandalorian thing you should be excited about. Like, retail's going to be like, oh, God, fool me once.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's something to be said definitely about that. The industry being cautious about things. What was it, Kenner, of course, who got the original Star Wars line back in the 70s. Because everyone else was passing up on it, and so that's where I'm going to lead into MOTU, of course, with the story. But the lessons learned, that you might leave an IP behind, or you might put all your eggs in one basket. Lesson learned, they won't do that, but there's certain things that are for sure. Star Wars usually is for sure, but in recent days, like you said, with saturation of so much content that they were cranking out, it's like we could really shoot ourselves in the foot by cranking out too much of this and just having peg warmers, and it hurts our brand by putting out all this, and none of it's selling, and then that's a real risk. And so we might have our complaints, but we have to also understand why that might be the case. And some adult collectors, especially in the Godzilla, if there's not so much retail, they went to the internet, and of course we were willing to shell out more dollars for our X Plus figures to get them imported or whatever we had to do, from Japan and all of that. And so we're willing to get those hyper realistic, hyper movie, what do you want to call it? Just the likeliness of the movie as close as we can, to the point where it's like, oh, there's a tiny little pink dot behind his ear, and everyone was complaining about that because why, and it's like, don't know, maybe it was in the movie, but yeah. So there's so much about Godzilla, like you said, the tooling that's involved. He's not as he's just not as smooth. He's got all those scales. Every artist talks about how Godzilla is very difficult because he's scaly, he's got his dorsal fins, he's got so much texture to him, and so many differences in the faces throughout the years. But that's bringing me to MOTU, because we're getting MOTU back in retail. We also have, all our classics lines that are out there. You worked on the classics line. I guess one of the things that I had to make sure I was understanding when I started purchasing some classics is that you look on the back, you see Matty Collector. And so Matty Collector is Scott's time, of course, at Mattel. But then the classics line must have been shipped over to Super 7 later down the line, I think.
Yeah. So as I was saying kind of earlier about how my main job, like if you went into the Mattel computer system and looked me up, it would say Scott Neitlich, brand manager for DC Universe, and I worked on Green Lantern theatrical and the Dark Knight, the movies, that kind of thing. Everything I was doing with Matty Collector was very much a side project, a passion project. And what it really came down to is Matty Collector, I'm sure it made money. It didn't lose money, but it didn't make enough money to justify a head count, if you will. So for every brand manager at Mattel who's running, any line, whether it's, Hot Wheels or Max Steel or Batman or whatever, it has to make a certain amount of money to justify having a person to run the brand. And Matty Collector didn't even come close to this, like not even like on the board. So when I left, anytime somebody leaves a position at Mattel, like if, one of the Barbie brand managers, Barbie obviously has multiple brand managers, so let's say, Barbie brand manager leaves, retires, whatever, it's going to trigger in the Mattel system to hire a new one. HR is going to be alerted and said, okay, Kathy Smith has now left Mattel and we need to hire someone new to take over her Barbie role. And so when I left with Matty Collector, I was working on Hot Wheels Star Wars, so there was a trigger to hire someone for Hot Wheels Star Wars, but because Matty Collector was never a job in the first place, there was no trigger to hire someone. So it was basically kind of like I left them with a full tank of gas, and they used it up over the next year, but they never refilled it. So then they were like, okay, well, we'll just shuffle it off to another company, Super 7, which is really the smartest thing they could have done, because Super 7 is a company that's designed for adult. It's a company that that's their forte. That's what they do, is adult collector products. So it was perfect. So it was at Super 7 for like 2, maybe 3 years, and then Mattel decided to take back the license. Because I think they're kind of going for one last push before the license reverts back to Universal in 2023. So I think that's why we're seeing more MOTU He-Man product at retail than we've ever seen in the history of the brand. Origins, there's Fisher-Price product, there's Imagine X, there's Revelations, there's the new CGI show, there's Mega Blocks. We've never seen, even back in '85, there wasn't this much, product. So my interpretation, I'm not in the trenches right now, but is that since Universal is going to be, taking back the license in 2023, this is kind of like Mattel giving it one last push, or maybe proving to Universal that they should be the caretakers of the brand, because Universal could still license the brand to Mattel starting in 2023. Universal just has the right to consider any toy company. Previous to right now, currently under the current contract, Mattel gets first toy rights. But then starting in 2023, Universal can go to anyone they want. So, so basically Mattel took it back from Super 7 for this big push. And we're getting new content, and I don't even know if I'm on the same subject anymore, what you asked.
No, it's all good. I was all over the place, too, but yeah, so that's the thing about the toy industry, unless you maybe turn it around on the back and realize where it came from sometimes, or in the case of Godzilla, look on his foot and see if it was made by Trendmasters or way back with the Imperial, Godzillas and all that. I kind of wanted to see because I was collecting the William Stout classics, for instance, and then I realized, wow, I was giving credit to Super 7 credit to Super 7 for Sarad, for instance, because I had the Rebel Leader He-Man and the Dark Despot not God Skeletor, but the Skeletor, the Dark Despot Skeletor, which were Super 7 creations, but some of the William Stout collection was put out by Matty Collector, and so I had to make sure I was giving credit where credit was due. So like Sarad and I think Gwildor, some of the others were put out by the Matty Collectors, and so when you kind of go out there and find these in your toy shops, your adult toy collector toy shops, or on eBay, you realize that Classics brand, anyways, you've got that Classics logo that flies at you right on the figure and on the pack, and and you realize, whether this was a Matty collector or Super 7. And so they're out there still for us adult collectors to pick up on. It's interesting to see the difference in price with all the different characters that out there, more rare, less rare, more, desirable. And that will lead me into Spector, actually. The figure that is out there that I need to get. Is it the Mighty Spector that you had a special place in your heart for, right?
Oh yeah, not just he's all over the place in my office here. Here's one of them. So this is Mighty Spector. So this was in 2012. It was the 30th anniversary of Masters of the Universe. We wanted to do something special, something different, and then we'd been cranking out figures of the month for 2 or 3 years at this point, and we wanted to try to find something unique to do to celebrate the 30th anniversary. And the idea that we had, and I guess by we I mean me, I always say we, but it was really I was running the show, was to put out 6 new figures to commemorate the 30th anniversary of the line that were going to be toys first, because that's how He-Man was first experienced. The show came later. The comics came later. I mean, there were mini comics packed in with the figures, but most children in 82, 83 experienced the brand first by seeing them on a toy shelf or getting them as a toy present. And I'm very much into the emotional connection between toy and consumer. And to me, that's a very unique emotional connection that the toy line had. Most don't. Most of them you see, an Avengers movie, and they're like, oh, I like that character, I'm going to go buy him. Or her, or it, or whatever. In the case of Groot or Vision or something. So we had 6 slots that were going to be in addition to everything else we were doing. It wasn't taking away slots from anything else. And the original idea was that I wanted to reach out to the people who worked on Masters of the Universe in 82, like the original creators, and have each one of them create a new character. And then we were going to bookend that. The first figure in that series was a character called Fearless Photog, who was a character there was a Create a Character contest in 85. And Nathan Bittner won. 8-year-old Nathan Bittner created a character named Fearless Photog. You guys can you can Google it and see all the you can still definitely find info about it. And more or less people from all over the country sent in designs, and he won. And that figure was supposed to be in the line, but the line ended and it never got made. So it sort of was this figure that was floating out there for 30 years that people knew about, and it felt like, okay, that's a great way to kick off the 30th anniversary, is to finally make Fearless Photog. And then we back-ended that program with a new Create a Character contest for adult fans. And we got, thousands and thousands of entries, and we had a winner for that. It was Castle Grayskull Man by Daniel Benedict. So that was our bookend figures. Then we had 4 in the middle. So the first plan was to go to original creators of the brand, and unfortunately, I couldn't get a hold of them, or more so, they weren't willing to do it for free. We had no money. We had no budget. So this was like creating a character for the love of the brand, and you had to sign it over legally to Mattel, and a lot of them were very offended at that, especially because they felt they weren't compensated for the brand in the first place. So, being asked to make another toy and not be compensated wasn't something they were willing to do. So my backup plan was then to go to established comic book writers and artists, because I knew a lot of them from working on the DC lines and Marvel lines and that kind of thing. So I emailed and called a lot of the ones that I personally knew and made the same pitch and said, hey, we want to create, 4 new characters. Love to have you create a character, put your name on package. And they're like, great. My charge for that is, XX thousands of dollars. And I was like, same thing, like, oh my gosh, no, we don't have money for this. This is about for the love of the brand. I did find one. So Jeff Johns, who a lot of people know from Green Lantern, he's now at Image. He was a big writer at DC. I met him through doing the Green Lantern movie, and he was and is a big He-Man fan, and he was totally up for it. He's like, oh my god, I would love to do that. Like, the joy of just getting to create a He-Man figure was enough. So he did create one of the slots, and I was supposed to fill the others with other comic book artists and writers, but again, no one wanted to do it for free, and management got sick of me wasting my time. They're like, you're spending so much time trying to track down all these people. They're like, just have people who work on the brand do it. People know you. People know the Four Horsemen who are the sculptors. You guys just do it yourself. And I was like, okay, like, I'm fine. That I'd love to do that. Like, but, sure. I mean, who's going to say no for the opportunity to create their own character? So that's how one of the slots fell to me. And then the Four Horsemen had a slot with the sculptors, and Terry Higuchi, who was the designer at Mattel on it, got a slot. And so we each created a character, and Mighty Spector was mine. And this was a character I created as a child. My company is named after him, too, Spector Creative, and also on YouTube. And he's a time traveler, and I got to have him as a toy. And, Mattel owns him, but I really had no plans to do anything with him. And, the fact that I have him as an articulated action figure is, the coolest thing ever, and I love it. And that's pretty much the story.
And how many of us can say that we've had our our own, as an adult collector, and had our own toy out there for purchase and for the adult collector industry. And so, very cool to see that that's out there. People can check it out, and it adds a little of the story to it, which is all what MOTU is. Godzilla's a great character and all that in what he is, but his storyline is what sells it, and the MOTU, is what our us Masters of the Universe fans love about each one of these characters. It might be so much of their accessories, but I think it's because of their story, their past, and all of that, and the story that went into those toys, because it did initially. Master of the Universe started as a toy. Everyone needs to realize that it didn't begin with the Filmation cartoon. It started as a toy line and then evolved into all of the intellectual property we have today, which is great to see. And now going into, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. We just had the trailer for the Revelation series coming out on Netflix come out. All of us had the chance to take a look at that. I'm sure you've had the chance to. First reactions, out the door.
Yeah, I probably should do a video about this as well, because I get a lot of comments asking my opinion. I mean, visually it looks really cool. I thought the choice in music, going back to very 80s music, was interesting, playing up the nostalgia, but also, I don't know, I've never seen He-Man set to, pop culture music before. I really like that they had so many vehicles and, so much, you saw Rotons and you saw Strider horses and that kind of thing. I think the most jarring thing to me was, I think there was I've actually only watched it once. I should really watch it again. There's a moment early in the trailer, I think, where Man-at-Arms punches Trapjaw in the face. I might be misremembering, but somebody punches somebody in the face. And that was jarring for me only in the sense that Filmation could never do that. If you go back to the Filmation show, one of the rules they had was they weren't allowed to have characters hit each other, ever. They could throw each other. He-Man could pick up Beastman and toss him. Right. And he could use his sword to cut trees or rocks, but he never used his sword to, slash at somebody, or... and he was never allowed to make physical contact, which, it's amazing they found ways around that and to have battles without having anyone hit each other. So seeing that, that was, to me, that was kind of, because this is supposed to be a sequel to Filmation, I was like, whoa, he just hit him in the face. Yeah. I mean, of course, in the 2000X series, they did a lot of that, and I love the 2000X series. It's my favorite. And this feels a lot more like 2000X, I think, than Filmation. Clamp Champ showed up for a second. It was great to see characters we've never seen in animation before show up. I'm very excited for it. I'm keeping a very open mind. But overall, the not the cloud, but that sense of reality that hangs over it all is Masters of the Universe as a brand has had way more failures than it's had successes. Mm-hmm. It's really only had one success, which was 83, 84, and 85. Yeah. Every other incarnation of it ever has failed in some way or another. Collectors may like the 2000X series, but it failed at retail, and the cartoon failed with kids. The 87 movie, bombed. New Adventures bombed. The last time He-Man was at retail was when the figures were packed with VHSs, if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, Classics did very well, but that was not a retail. That was like done just for adults, like online, and so I guess that could be considered a success for the brand. But the mainstream stuff, She-Ra, the Netflix She-Ra show, was a failure. I mean, it's got fans, but the toys bombed. They were on clearance within like a week. So, I'm trying to be conscious of, it's a very hard brand to do. And when it worked in the early 80s, it worked for very specific reasons because of what was happening in popular culture and politics and the economy. There were very specific factors that went into why it was a success at the time.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's going to take kids for this brand to succeed again. Like, you could do adult collector animation from here to wazoo, but if you want to sell toys, if you're selling them at retail, and that's also my kind of concern with the show, is that they're selling the toys at retail. I want them to succeed, but to me, if you're going to sell He-Man at retail, it should be aimed entirely at kids. And you could do exclusives for figures at conventions or online, but I'm a little concerned that they're aiming the Revelations line at the adult collector at retail. It's almost like being set up for failure.
Yeah. Yeah, so the lot there, we'll see. Yeah, and it's great to see them taking the risk of going forward with it, because we all know, like you said, so many failures in Masters of the Universe with the film. Even though the film, the 87 film became a cult classic over the time, we also have to get back to reality and the fact that its box office success was a failure. So, learning the lessons from the past and saying, if we're going to re-release it, it's like, but we're going to do it better this time. Yeah, but better is relative, isn't it? And so, did it sell? We've seen IP have its re-releases and, have major failures, and you can chalk it up to one reason or another, but if there's just not the interest, and if it's not selling to the audience, then there's a reason why it failed and why it got, put off the air. Like the 2000X, we love it, but it only lasted 39 episodes or so. So that's where, if it's not selling, it's not just going to be for me and you who do love it, because we're not enough. We've got to have a mass audience, a big audience and Netflix taking the risk with, Kevin Smith and all the creators that went into it. I think they've got a great voice acting group behind it. I think that's kind of cool to see Mark Hamill being in this and seeing that, but we'll see how it goes, and being cautiously optimistic, I guess, going forward. But like you said, toys are part of it that drives it, and why something succeeds and why it doesn't succeed. We can look to the past to see why that happened. So with that out of the way, I'd like to kind of wrap up with what's next for Scott and either the YouTube channel, Spector Creative. What's kind of coming up next for you that we can look forward to seeing?
Thanks. And also, by the way, just closing it out on MOTU, I want it to succeed. I don't want people to come across thinking like I'm rooting for it to fail or something. I'm just being cautiously optimistic.
Yes.
But nothing would make me happier than seeing a new generation of kids loving He-Man the way I did. So I want to just make sure to put that out there. What's next for me? World domination. I thought I'd start with Australia, work my way up to, no, just kidding.
Excellent. Start with Australia, yes.
Like Lex Luthor, right? Doesn't he he's in the Superman 2? I'll take Australia. Spector Creative .com is, where you can find my business online. If anyone out there has, ideas for retail, toy development, doesn't have to be toy. I've done beauty products. I've done food products, all sorts of things, but I have a vast knowledge of getting product to retail, as well as creating content for it. I have a lot of other projects in the hopper. I have an animated series that I've optioned that hopefully will get picked up. That's always circling around. I have a toy line coming to Target this fall. which I'll be excited to talk more about soon. It's not Adult Collector, I will say that. It's nothing to do with Adult Collector or even action figures. One of the things that we do at Spector Creative is my partner has her master's degree in child play therapy from NYU. So we work very much about like the emotional connection between kids and toys, and really unlocking that and bringing product out that will actually engage children in play and satisfy that need, because it's so important for kids to play, especially in this they spent the past year staring at screens more than ever. And I'm such a big believer in children and play and using the imagination. So that's really kind of where my focus is. And then YouTube, I'm continuing to pump out videos like a madman. I comment back on every comment. I love topic suggestions, and I give full credit to people who give me topic suggestions in the video. So if you want to know something about the toy industry, let me know in the comments section, and I'll make a video on it probably, because I always need topics if I'm going to keep up this rate of releasing videos. And I also teach on Sunday mornings Egyptian hieroglyphics in a series called Doodling with Purpose, because it's just a hobby of mine, and I couldn't find anyone doing it on YouTube. So I'm like, fine, I'll do it myself. So that, and if anyone's interested, one other plug, as far as a He-Man movie, I wrote one, and it's on my YouTube channel. I read the synopsis. It's about 25 minutes long, with appropriate visuals. It was just a project for a creative, expression project. I did it after I left Mattel. But I've got a lot of positive feedback from people saying, like, yes, this is like the way a He-Man movie should be. So if you're interested, do check it out on Spector Creative. You can just search my channel for He-Man movie, and I think it's a good 20-minute little story. I mean, it's a full-length movie. I just summarize it. So
yeah, your outline for that episode specifically, I've watched twice already, and I just remember sitting there listening to it with a drink in my hand and just never taking a drink because I was so enthralled with the visuals. You could even turn off the screen and just listen to how Scott describes it, and I think it's one of those, when I was in my head saying this is a $200 million blockbuster for me, so I think this would have been a great film to have. And we all know the He-Man film has always been in production hell since the '87 film, to make another reboot to it. And if you're in the film industry, I say you look up Scott, because this story really had me engaged and just listening and putting together the visuals in my head. So it's a great episode. I'd love to hear the full fleshed out script if you're planning on maybe doing a video on that.
Yeah, what I wrote for it was, I wrote the first 30 pages as a script, mm-hmm. and then I wrote the full movie as an outline, which is what I read, and that's designed. The audience for an outline is a movie executive, to basically show them what the script could be like, and then the first 30 pages were meant to be a sort of test, or at least like a taste. So the idea was I could give Sony an outline in the first 30 pages. And I also uniquely created like a visual guide, which is in the video too, showing which characters. I actually used a map of Eternia and showed the trail, where people go. Because one of the things that always frustrated me reading so many He-Man scripts over the years at Mattel was that people had no concept of geography on where Castle Grayskull was located and where Snake Mountain was located. And I'm like, no, you can't move in that direction because there's a mountain range between there or something. Or an ocean. So I might sometime get a group of friends together and read the first 30 pages. I don't know if I'm going to have the time to beat out the entire thing into a script, but it is meant to be a 4-quadrant movie. It's meant to be not just for you and me, the fans. It's meant to be for a mainstream audience with enough little winks and Easter eggs for us. That's kind of what I'm most proud about, is that it's not a fanboy movie. It's meant to be a family movie that someone who's never heard of He-Man can go take their family to see and would enjoy it. So
yeah, it's so fleshed out, and then that's why I'm going to leave out the cliffhanger at the end for this episode, because I want everyone to go watch your video, check it out, and like it, because that cliffhanger you left at the end was immediately when I went to my kids and I said, what do you think about this? And they all, woo, you know, just we're loving that idea. And it's like, you know, sequel bait, but at the same time, you know, it left you wanting more. So that's what you got to do when you're pitching something, is to leave them with a little bit something else. So I'm going to leave everyone with a little something else to check out Spector Creative. Check out what Scott has cranked out on his channel. Great content, great information, and I just look forward to the next video every day that you're putting them out. I've got the notifications turned on, so everyone should do that and be notified when new content's coming out. So while we're wrapping up this video, any final thoughts that you might have, Scott?
You know, keep collecting what you love, and I think really just try to be grateful for what you get, because we are living kind of in a very golden age of action figures, getting so much stuff for so many brands. And if you're spending your whole time being, you know, angry over things, then you're not enjoying the hobby. And you know, just like it's never going to be perfect. It's distribution, character selection, articulation. It's never going to be perfect, but the people who are making it from love, and you know, just enjoy what you're doing, because it's really great that we're living in a world where we're getting so many cool toys. We've never had it like this before. So, you know, be happy, be well to each other, and live long and prosper.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Scott, for your time. You're very generous with it, and I definitely want to have you on again at some point in the future when we may have some more IP coming out, and just getting into some different topics of adult collecting and insight from the industry. So again, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, absolute pleasure. And yeah, I'd love to be back anytime. Thank you so much, one, for accommodating my time, and great to chat with you. I don't get to have these conversations. Yeah, I love just talking toys. It's not like I do that with my wife and my kids. So this is fantastic.
All right, excellent. And for you out there, I encourage you to check out Scott's channel, Spector Creative, on YouTube, and the website as well. And subscribe here to The Monster Report on YouTube and on our new podcast, so you can listen to it in the car and check out all the new content we're cranking out. And so like, subscribe, comment, all of those good things. You know what you're doing out there. So for Scott Neitlich and Nick Adam Poling here on The Monster Report, until next time.